Once upon a time, in a little village where the days began with the ringing of temple bells and the laughter of children running barefoot through fields, lived a boy named Arav. He wasn't like the other boys. While his friends chased dragonflies near the lotus pond or flew kites above the mustard fields, Arav preferred to sit alone beneath the shade of a neem tree, watching the clouds roll across the sky. He was only 14, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had lived far longer. His father, a farmer, often teased, "This boy thinks too much. The crops don't grow by staring at the sky." He was only 14, but his eyes held the weight of someone who had lived far longer. His father, a farmer, often teased, "This boy thinks too much. The crops don't grow by staring at the sky." But Arav couldn't stop thinking. He had seen too much for his age. The birth of calves, the funerals in the village, the cries of joy and sorrow that echoed through the same narrow lanes. And every night, before he fell asleep on the mud floor beside his siblings, he asked the stars the same question. Why must everything end? One evening, when the sky was painted in orange and pink, Arav wandered past the village, barefoot, dust clinging to his feet. He passed the old banyan tree the villagers said was sacred, inhabited by spirits and stopped near the village pond. The water shimmered under the full moon, and the air was still, almost sacred. He sat on a stone and stared at his reflection, disturbed by ripples, as fish kiss the surface. He whispered to the wind, "Why are we born if we must die? What is the purpose of it all?" He didn't expect an answer, but that night, something answered. A sudden rustle in the leaves behind him made Arav freeze. From the shadows emerged a serpent, long, majestic, and unlike any snake he'd seen. Its scales shimmered like emeralds under moonlight. Yet it didn't threaten, it didn't coil to strike. Instead, it spoke. "Serpent," deep voice, "you ask questions that most never dare to ask, child of the soil." Arav, shocked. "You speak?" "Serpent, I have existed since before your village was born. I have slithered through centuries. I have seen men rise and fall, only to rise again. You seek to understand life, but you are only looking at the middle of the story." Arav, nervous but curious, "Then show me the whole story." The world around them shifted. The banyan tree faded. The pond dissolved into mist. Arav found himself floating above scenes of life playing out like a grand village fair. He saw a seed fall from a mango tree, buried in the soil, watered by rain, growing into a sapling, then a tree bearing fruit, until it withered and fell, returning to the same ground. He saw a cow give birth to a calf, the calf grow, then pass, its body becoming food for the earth. He saw a grandmother's ashes drift into the river, only to feed the rain that watered the fields once more. Serpent, voice echoing in his mind, "This is the cycle. Nothing truly ends. What dies, transforms. What is lost, returns in another form." Arav tears in his eyes. "But why do we feel so much pain?" Serpent, "Because humans forget. You mourn the leaf that falls, but do not notice the bud that grows in its place. Pain is part of the change, but wisdom is knowing the change never stops." Arav saw visions of himself as a child, as a man, as an old farmer, then as a breeze, a tree, a bird, a baby again. His soul danced through lifetimes like a thread weaving a tapestry too grand to understand in one glance. And for the first time, he smiled. He wasn't afraid anymore. Arav softly, "So even death is not the end?" Serpent, "It is but a change of clothing, like a farmer's kurta after a long day. The soul must rest, then rise again. As I shed my skin, you too shall shed yours many times." Arav, "Then what is the purpose of life?" Serpent, "To live, to learn, to grow and let go. To carry love from one form to the next, to understand the dance and become part of its rhythm." Arav woke under the banyan tree, just as the first light of dawn kissed the earth. The pond shimmered, the village stirred, and the serpent was gone. But something within Arav had changed. He walked back to the village with a quiet strength. He helped his father in the field that morning without complaint. He laughed with his siblings. He listened to the temple bells and heard more than sound, he heard meaning. From that day on, Arav was never the same. He no longer feared endings because he had learned beneath a banyan tree that life doesn't end. It flows. It returns. It remembers, just like the wind, just like the river, just like the serpent.